platter?
I have a handle that I usually use for that. Okay, so just so that anyone that opens this video is aware, this is a class that I am teaching, so you may see other people's hands, you may hear other voices, and we're working on a water lily. We're going to start with the lily pads, and I have ultramarine blue out, I have new gamboge out, because I may decide to use those instead of cobalt and my aureolin yellow. So I'm going to also pull out cobalt, and I will also pull out my aureolin, because even though I might find the perfect mix, it is nice to have a variety, and generally in nature it's not one solid color for certain things, especially lily pads and flowers and trees, and there's a variety happening in there, and it just makes it more interesting for the viewer too. Okay, so I have aureolin yellow now, I have new gamboge, cobalt, and ultramarine, and I'm just going to quickly make a little mix. This is ultramarine and new gamboge, which it's not quite as vibrant as I want. So I'm going to try the new gamboge with some cobalt and see if I like that better. It's pretty close. So I think I will have majority be my aureolin yellow and cobalt, and I will have the cobalt and new gamboge as a little bit of a mix that I can put in there to kind of vary it. So okay, put that back there. And I am not wetting the lily pads prior to painting them, but if you're working on one and you feel like it's pretty big and you don't know if you can get through that whole area, wetting it prior to painting on it can give you a little more time to paint in whatever shape you're painting. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to get just a touch more aureolin because I know I'm going to use a lot of this. Okay, so I want it kind of on the yellowy side, maybe a touch of new gamboge. So my brush is not quite completely mixed, there's a variety in there. And any highlights that are on this lily pad, I'm going to leave by painting around them. So there's an edge here that's light, and so I'm just going to leave that. And you can see that I'm just sort of skimming the page with the paint, and I'm using a variety of those two color mixes. Okay, and that comes over here. And so if it goes a little bluer in places or a little yellower, it will give it more interest. And actually at the back, kind of right in there toward the middle, it's a little cooler. And then more yellow. So now I just have to be careful. I kind of actually like that highlight that's right there, so I'm going to leave it. And okay. So I'm just working down. I tend to work from the top down, and my board is tipped probably about 2 or 3 inches off the table with my block. And I'm not really working with really wet paint, so I'm having to watch this edge because I need to make sure that I'm moving fast enough that I don't end up with a dry edge before I get to, so everything has a smooth look to it. And I'm almost completely out of yellow now. And I'm using mostly the aureolin. I might put just a little bit of the new gamboge. You can touch back into an area as long as you do not add water to the mix. So this is starting to dry up here, so I would not touch that, but this was still a little shiny. So as long as my paint is not really wet and I don't get water on my brush, so I just went directly over there and I can touch into that. Okay. So that's one. I'll do one more, and so I'll do this one because it is behind this lily pad, and I just want you to see that by masking it, I can literally just paint across there, and I don't have to think about painting over and around those shapes. So I'm getting out more Aureolin yellow. I still have enough New Gamboge, and I need more cobalt. Okay, so this is the cobalt. And again, just so there's variety, I may put a little more blue in this one, or a little more of the New Gamboge. And I'm going to start though with the Aureolin and cobalt. And these lily pads, I have a few extra lines on them because either there was a highlight, or I noticed on the edges that they have some kind of a reddish brown, and I'm not going to worry about that right now because I don't want it to run into my the greens of my lily, so I will come back later and put that on. Okay. So I'm using the Scotch brand masking tape to mask it, and you can see I'm just painting right over it. Okay. And I will have to also soften these edges later because I didn't mask them, but they're going to be hard edged because I'm not softening it right now. Okay. And then lily pads often have these lines that kind of radiate out from the center, and so that's why I did that kind of mark there. And because this is cool blue down here, I'm going back into my blue because I want to make it feel like it's underneath the lily right there. And then as I get around the outside edge, I'm going to go back into some New Gamboge right in here and come around the edge. Okay. All right, so you can see there's a variety going on in there, and it just makes it interesting to have kind of that color change. Okay, so if you are getting started on yours, one, you can do the small color study just to get an idea of your colors. You could do, you could draw this lily on a separate piece of paper, or that lily pad, and just practice painting one off of your paper if you want to. Don't get too hung up though on you have to make it be exactly like what's there. As long as there's some variety in your lily pads and you're using kind of similar colors throughout those guys, they're going to look right. And it's more about getting in there and painting and just using enough water on your brush. In fact, there's still a little bit of water pooling in some of these areas. So if I take my brush and dry it and then just pick that up gently without stroking, then I can hopefully keep from having a back run happen. Okay. All right, so I will let you guys go either get started on a color study, or you can start on your big one, and you can also finish the color one. Okay? So I decided to add the other lilies to this video so that you guys could see those go in, and then I will get this video out onto YouTube for you. So I'm going back and getting a little more Aureolin yellow. And I still have some New Gamboge on my palette, and I will get some more cobalt. And this is the next day, so my paint dried on my palette overnight. Not a big deal, I'll just kind of wake it up with the new paint that I'm putting down. Okay. And one of the things that we didn't talk about last night is that the cooler greens will recede. So if I want to add a little bit of cool green to some of these lily pads that are in the back, that will help them recede in give a greater distance, feel of distance in the painting. So I don't want to change them a lot, but as I come forward to this lily pad that's up here, I will probably warm it up a little more than the ones that are back in the back. And so I'm still using cobalt and the aureolin yellow, and I just added a touch of the New Gamboge because I used that earlier as well on the earlier lily pads. And I have some white showing up because of where my brush stroke is leaving little sparkles of white. And I kind of like those. They look like highlights, and so I'm going to leave those. Later on, if I decided that it wasn't quite the look I wanted, I could go in and paint some color into that area if I want to, but I did that as well over here. So because this one is wet, I can't paint that one. So I'm going to go down here, slide that back just a little bit. And so this is the one that, even though I'm going to be using the same base coat of aureolin yellow and cobalt for my green, I will put a little more New Gamboge in this because I want it to read as a little warmer, and that will also help it feel like it's closer. So a little more of the New Gamboge. And I am painting this on dry just like I did the other ones. And I am painting under where the shadow will eventually go over it. So this is the color of the lily pad, and then the shadow will go on top of that. And I'm not worried about my edge there. I have my line for my border. And if this one ends up getting framed, then it would, that line or those kind of rough edges would be covered. Okay, so get that a little bit. So I need to dry right here so that I can paint this one. And this is the first coat on these lily pads. They will probably get one, possibly two more additional layers or glazes to them. And so for this first pass for the class, it's just to get an initial layer of color on them. All right, let me dry that little corner and then I will finish up. So I did not dry the whole lily pad. That's actually just a touch moist still. So if you touch your paper, for instance, this lily pad is dry, it doesn't have a temperature. It feels kind of room temperature. If it has a shine to the surface, then I know that it's still wet. But if the shine is gone and I just touch it gently, and if it feels cool to the touch, then I know it is still wet. And it is possible, depending on how wet I paint here, if this is still slightly wet, that the moisture level here could push and cause a bloom into this one because it would wick up that wetter paint. So I am going to dry this again just to make sure that it's completely dry, and then I will paint this corner. Okay. All right, and so this lily pad is just a small piece back here, and I'm going to use a touch more cobalt in it, partly because I want it to be in the background, but then just to give it a little bit of variation as well. A little bit of New Gamboge. And I'm not cleaning my brush in between, so my brush still has some of the prior color on it, and that will affect the look of the paint that I'm putting down. But with these lily pads, that just kind of blends together and gives interesting color changes to my greens. All right, so that is the first coat on these, or first glaze on these lily pads, and we will continue with this water lily and the other parts of the background water in the next video, and next class. So I will see everybody next week. Bye for now.